Alright guys, Wes here, welcome back to the channel. So Resident Evil 9 has officially been announced by Capcom, according to the director Koshi Nakanishi. After months of leaks and rumors about the new Resident Evil game in development, we finally have some news that's coming straight from Capcom, and we're going to go over all the details about the announcement. As you know, Resident Evil 9 is shrouded in mystery. There is a ton of stuff that we don't know about the game, like who is going to be the main protagonist. Will it be Leon, maybe Chris, or possibly Jill making a return? Where is RE9 going to take place? Is it going to be a first person or third person experience? Well, today we are going to dive into the world of Resident Evil and attempt to uncover all of the mysteries. Check the video chapters for easy viewing. Don't forget to enter my PS5 giveaway at 160,000 subscribers, and let's get started. As you know, Resident Evil 9 has had quite a few rumors and leaks from industry insiders. We've known that Capcom has been working on the next installment for a while, but there hasn't been anything concrete to go off of. But lucky for us, during Capcom's Summer Next event, they revealed a ton of news for games coming out. But at the end of the showcase, they slipped in a banger. They had the director of Resident Evil 7, Koshi Nakanishi, and when talking about that game, they said this, and I quote, "If I'm being honest, as a brand, we were off track. The action element had been expanded and fans reacted much more negatively than expected. In the end, a Resident Evil game has to be scary, so we took another look at it. And the general consensus from fans of the series was that a Resident Evil game is one that should scare the hell out of you. And that was the starting point for Resident Evil 7. I played Resident Evil from the beginning, and those early games were terrifying. I was excited to try to make Resident Evil 7 into a game that would live up to the RE name." The narrator of the Capcom Next event then stated, "The fear-inducing Resident Evil that Nakanishi was after had a major impact on its release, but the course that he chose was far from the path of least resistance. In order to make a fear-focused Resident Evil, many elements of the game had to be reevaluated from scratch, like the setting, the characters, the game system. Anything that didn't induce fear had to change, and sometimes we threw the whole thing out. And in order to make it scarier, we decided to go with a first-person point of view. Up to that point, Resident Evil had been third-person perspective with the character on the screen, but when you're viewing the world from a safe distance behind the character, it's not as immersive and frightening. First person forces you to be up close and personal, and that's exactly what we were trying to accomplish." The director then said, "We're making a new Resident Evil. It was really difficult to figure out what to do after 7, but I found it. And to be honest, it feels substantial. I can't share any details just yet, but I hope you're excited for the day I can." So there you have it. This news is coming straight from the director of the next game. A new Resident Evil is indeed happening. Now, this obviously should come to no surprise. We've had leaks in the past from insiders stating that Resident Evil 9 was indeed on the way, so really this news was just a matter of time. Now, for those of you that don't know, the director behind the previous game, Resident Evil Village, the director of that game was Morimasa Sato, so they won't be directing Resident Evil 9. The director of this new game is Koshi Nakanishi, and they were the lead on Resident Evil Biohazard. Nakanishi previously worked on Resident Evil 5 as a designer, and Resident Evil Mercenaries 3D, and Resident Evil Revelations. And I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely loved Resident Evil 7, so for me, this news is great. That game revitalized the franchise for me, as the shift to first person and returning to the roots of survival horror was amazing. It really brought me back to the tension and atmosphere of the older games of the series. I mean, guys, Jack Baker begging Ethan to save his family lives rent-free in my brain. It was such a profound experience, and I can't wait to see what Koshi does with Resident Evil 9. So I think the biggest aspect that everyone wants to know is who is going to be the protagonist of Resident Evil 9. Now, this has been quite a big debate within the community. The protagonist of Resident Evil 7 and 8 was Ethan Winters, and he is obviously out of commission, so RE9 is most likely going to feature one of the longer standing main characters, as the plot of this new game is most likely going to be focused on tying Ethan Winters into the greater canon of Resident Evil, even more than the previous game in the series, Resident Evil Village, did. This means that Resident Evil 9 is likely going to bring back Leon or Chris, and according to recent leaks, it sounds like that's exactly what the plan is. Now, it's also possible that they could bring someone like Jill Valentine back after years of being completely absent from the series since Resident Evil Revelations, which was released in 2012, so it's been about 12 years since she's been at the forefront. Now, on the flip side, Leon also hasn't been a mainline character since RE6 back in 2012 as well. Either way, both are deserving to be at the helm. Now, according to recent leaks, it does seem like the main protagonist of Resident Evil 9 will be Leon Kennedy. With how popular Leon is in Resident Evil 2 and RE4 remakes, it seems like an obvious decision for Capcom to make. Now, there has been some previous rumors suggesting that there will be multiple protagonists, but nothing concrete on that front. Now, some are under the impression that Chris Redfield will be the protagonist due to some implications made in the Resident Evil Village plot, but it seems that Capcom will ultimately be bringing back Leon Kennedy. The Resident Evil franchise has taken us to various locations around the world, with each location having unique atmosphere and challenge to tackle. The games have taken us to places like Raccoon City, the Arklay Mountains, Baker Family Swamp in Louisiana, China, Eastern Europe with RE Village, and more. As far as we know, the location of Resident Evil 9 won't be revealed to us until we get our first look at at the game. However, there have been leaks that the game will be set in a fictional Southeast Asian island that's inspired by Singapore. Now, if you watched my last Resident Evil video covering the rumored location, you know I'm personally a fan of this idea. According to Dusk Golem, the leaker who reported on it went to Twitter after the announcement of Resident Evil 9, and they said this, and I quote, "There was an RE8 concept that was a direct sequel to RE7 in Village, but it got sidelined a bit after Resident Evil 7's original lower than expected initial sales and a middling received vertical slice demo. A more ambitious RE8 that was set to be open world using advancements to the RE engine that they were developing for Dragon's Dogma 2, such as being open worlds, was greenlit, but there came concern with the amount of time that this title would take, as Capcom didn't want there to be a 6+ year gap between RE7 and RE8. Village had been doing well internally in its development, so in 2019 it was decided to replot their course. Village became RE8 again. What was RE8 at the time became RE9, and at the time Resident Evil 9 was set to be an open world style game set on a Southeast Asian island. So obviously we have to take this stuff with a grain of salt. As Dusk mentioned, the plans could have likely changed throughout the development, but from the sounds of how Koshi described the next game, he said the words, and I quote, "It feels substantial." It could be a language thing, but using the word substantial is very curious to me. When I think of something substantial, I think of a massive undertaking and a generational leap for the series. If Resident Evil 9 does end up going open world with the setting, that would be an absolute game changer. The tech is there. Dragon's Dogma 2, despite some of its issues, handles the open world pretty well. Koshi's latest game revitalized the franchise by returning to its survival horror roots and introducing a first-person perspective. Resident Evil 9 can do the same by being the first fully open world game of the series. Now, another aspect of Resident Evil 9 that has sparked some debate within the community is about whether or not it will feature a first-person or third-person perspective. The recent trends in the franchise suggest a possible dual option approach. RE7 Biohazard and RE7 Village both featured a first-person view, which according to Koshi enhances immersion and horror. However, Resident Evil Village later introduced a third-person mode, most likely after the player feedback and third-person mods that were out after launch. I think Capcom recognized the classic appeal and delivered on that. The success of Resident Evil 2, RE3, and RE4 remakes, which used a third-person perspective, further highlighted the appeal amongst a lot of players. These remakes were obviously well received, showing that third-person can effectively deliver both horror and action, appealing to longtime fans and new players alike. Now, to me, it seems likely that Resident Evil 9 might offer both perspectives. Having the ability to choose what perspective you want to play in would cater to a broader audience, which might also help with the game's replayability while also acknowledging the series' history. I've said this for a while, but more choices you give the players with gameplay options, the better the retention will be. Give players the tools and they'll use them. Now, we obviously don't have the confirmation of what gameplay perspective will be, but the trend certainly seems that third person isn't going anywhere. However, as Koshi mentioned earlier in the video, he said, in order to make Resident Evil 7 scarier, we decided to go with a first person point of view. Up to that point, RE had been third person with the character on the screen, but when you're viewing the world from a safe distance behind the character, it's not as immersive and frightening. So unless Koshi has had a change of heart, I'd say that his ideal perspective is going to be first person. Now let's dive into the thing that everyone wants to see, and that is the first trailer for Resident Evil 9. The fact that the director announced the game in a summer event tells me that things are moving forward rather steadily. It could mean that they're preparing for a reveal as we speak. According to the previous insider leaks, the targeted release date is January of 2025, and if that date is still correct, we could see a full reveal anytime this fall. My guess is if it's happening in January, the Game Awards 2024 would be a solid event to showcase the game at. Now, recent insider reports have stated that the reveal trailer could be on track for a few months from now, which also aligns with Capcom's typical marketing timeline of revealing major titles around 6 to 10 months before their release date. So the next few months will definitely be telling. Now, as I briefly mentioned, Resident Evil 9, according to the reports, was scheduled for a release in January 2025. Now, if that ends up being the case, I'll be pretty surprised, but if we get the reveal within the next few months, a January release date would totally make sense. However, with how stacked of a year 2025 is going to be with Grand Theft Auto 6, I would say the best release window for RE9 would be the first half of 2025. There is zero chance that Capcom is going to want to compete with GTA 6's launch window, so if we don't get a reveal until late 2025, I wouldn't expect them to reveal it until either holiday season of 25 or even early 2026, but according to Dusk Golem, they have been in development with this game since shortly after RE7 Biohazard, which released in 2018. So unless there were some insane development problems that caused a reboot to the game, Resident Evil 9 is going to be just around the corner. The hype and excitement of Resident Evil 9 is going to keep growing as the months go by leading up to the official reveal trailer. I really hope Capcom has cooked with this game. Let me know in the comments who you want the main protagonist to be. For me, it's either got to be Jill or Leon. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on so you're not missing out on any future gaming news and all things Resident Evil 9. Don't forget to enter my PS5 giveaway. Those details are in the pinned comment. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.